Thanks, guys. Appreciate the patience. So we've been talking a lot about the evolution of the mobile gaming market, which is happening really in hyperdrive. And I wanted to break down some of those trends for you that may be relevant in terms of thinking about where we are, a snapshot today, and how the market's evolved over the last 24 months. So Scopely is based in Los Angeles. We're a next-generation mobile-first publisher. We're working with a select group of elite game developers to try and take their games to the next level, and we are focused on operating live games as a service, as a publisher. This is a pretty key distinction. Traditionally, publishers, that word comes from the console era and is associated with marketing box products that are complete, that are not a live, evolving organism. And in the free-to-play era, we're very focused on continuing to maintain these services. So we've launched 4 number one apps on the iPhone in a row, 4 top free games, including 2 games from independent development studios. We're not aware of any other game publisher in the world that's launched 2 third-party games to number one in the App Store in the last 12 months. We've had over 1 billion engagements a month right now on our apps and a registered user base of over 40 million users that we can promote our games to. So we've had some experience making our own games. We've had experience publishing other people's games, and I've learned a lot over the last few years about what works and why. I think in terms of understanding the scale of audience choice, this is pretty important function to understand that we are in a huge battle for mind share. People have a device in their pocket that can literally do anything imaginable. You can call a loved one, you can watch any video that you could imagine, you can listen to any song, you could read the news, you could read your email, and if you choose to play a game during that span, you only have 2.5 million to choose from. So the attention is spread pretty thin across a lot of products, and this is the number of apps that are actually in the App Store and available to consumers, and there's a finite amount of time. So it's not just about distribution, because distribution used to be how people thought about this, but anybody can put their app in the App Store now. Now it's about discovery. How do you get it actually in the forefront of people's minds and coming back on a regular basis to use your product? So this distinction of games as product versus services is, people talk about live games as a service, but I don't think a lot of independent developers realize how big a distinction this is. On the left, we have an example, Threes, which is a game that I would qualify as a product. It's a great game. I love playing it, but it doesn't evolve on a daily basis. There are no live events. It's not dynamic on a per user basis. It's a relatively static product, even if there are new content updates being shipped every few weeks. On the right, we have Modern War from Funzio, which is very much a service. There are constantly events every week and competition between players, and people are forming relationships inside the game which evolve over time. And you can see there's a very different revenue trajectory there. Products typically need a large influx of new users to maintain revenues. They're only as good as the pipeline of new people that are coming in. Whereas services can often have a trajectory that looks like this, where they generate a lot of downloads early on in their lifespan, and then revenues actually grow over time as downloads decline, because they're building an active and engaged community that's a really dense audience that may be playing that game for years at a time. And from a business perspective, as a publisher, we want to create lines of business that are valuable for years to come. It's very difficult to build a business as a developer or a publisher if you're making a lot of money for 3 months and then it's gone. So this era of live games as a service, in a lot of ways, favors scale in a way that the early days of the App Store didn't. And what we see now is that the top grossing charts very closely mirror the top user acquisition charts. If you were actually to rank games based on marketing budget, it would mirror almost exactly the top grossing charts. And the reason that is because the goal of publishers in this era is to spend as much money as they possibly can marketing their products, which is a little bit counterintuitive. In the console era, you would set a marketing budget and try and do as much as you could from a sales standpoint with the marketing budget you have. Now you're looking for ways to spend more money. And that means that you need to have best-in-class KPIs. You need to have the highest lifetime value of a user in your space. Then you can spend more money and scale your product. Then more people are talking about it, and the virtuous cycle starts to begin of you distancing yourself from other games in that category as a category winner, when there are all sorts of ancillary benefits to being a category winner. Everybody's interested in working with you in international markets. You have lower user acquisition costs through BD partnerships, featuring, those kinds of things. So it's important to understand the sort of structural disadvantages that indie developers are facing when they're going up against these large publishers that are at the top of the top grossing right now. If you think about this business is really how many users can you put into a game and how much are those users worth, it's really an equation of average CPI versus average LTV. And can you find a way for LTV to exceed CPI? And so new developers are at just a huge disadvantage on both sides of this equation, and often in ways that they can't even fully comprehend. On the CPI side, they have very little to no existing audience. They don't have 50 million people that they can leverage when they're launching a game to build awareness and help it rise above the noise. It's difficult for them to secure featuring from Apple and Google, which is often the primary strategy of independent developers that we talk to. Is, Apple and Google featured a game that wasn't even as good as mine. We think we have a real shot. Well, Apple and Google have to meet with the other 2.5 million app developers on a regular basis, and they only have so much bandwidth. They're only human. There are not that many people on the team, and so they tend to spend most of their time on people that are consistently bringing them good games over a period of time. And the top publishers are meeting with them every 8 weeks and talking to them every week about how their slate is coming along, showing them builds of the game along the way, and they're on the radar screen the entire time. And often, 12, 16 weeks in advance of launch, they have those featured spots locked down, that the independent developer doesn't even know what else is coming out 16 weeks from now, and is scrambling to get in the door to get some attention there. They have very little marketing leverage with partners. Obviously, companies that are spending millions of dollars a month with an ad network, that ad network is going to prioritize the companies that are buttering their bread. New developers that may not be here 6 months from now saying, I've got $50,000 to spend or $500,000 to spend. It's just not very interesting to them. You don't have the performance marketing infrastructure to measure how your user acquisition is performing. So the top developers, the top publishers are adjusting their bids in real time across a web of different variables, from what time of day it is, what device are people using, how many sessions in the first 24 hours are being played by people coming from a particular network, and they have predictive lifetime value of user modeling technologies that are based on historical data, of which they have more than you would have. And so you wind up spinning across a bunch of different channels and being relatively ineffective in managing that. You're not optimizing creatives relentlessly with 25 different kinds of creatives that can make a difference if you're running campaigns at scale. You have less capital, it's more risk, you have higher CPIs because you don't have as much scale, and you have difficulty localizing and culturalizing, where a lot of the growth and lower user acquisition costs are in these developing markets where people are not competing as heavily. You're one of those people that's not competing. So you're at a supreme disadvantage on the marketing side in terms of paid marketing. On the LTV side, you're at a disadvantage because you have been in market for less time. The top grossing games, most of them have been in market for over 12 months. They've been optimized for across every aspect of the game economy. There's a rich content ecosystem. There's a lot of depth of the game that's been created over years, and they have infrastructure to run those live games as a service where they can create dynamic events and keep it interesting for people over time. They have community management programs and VIP programs where they have live people that are talking to the most valuable users, another thing that's hard for you to do when you don't have scale. And so you might be acquiring super valuable users and losing them to other companies because you're not taking care of them in the same way. And then you're often not monetizing non-paying users very well either, because ad monetization is something that really gets a lot better with scale. So it's difficult in the free-to-play market to win along either of these vectors if you're competing with big publishers head on. So what does the sweet spot for indie developers look like? If you're going the product route, this is sort of a image of high quality gameplay, originality, and strong word of mouth. You need a game that people are going to talk about that's original, that is different from other things that are in the market. And if you're launching it as a product, you don't need to maintain it in the same kind of aggressive way that the top publishers are maintaining their services. Monument Valley is a good example of this recently. It's a beautiful game. Everybody loves talking about it because when you talk about Monument Valley, you're telling other people, I have great taste in games, and they're inferring that about you, and so people want to share it. Games like Fruit Ninja and Cut the Rope, massive scale in the earlier days of the App Store with unique mechanics that people talked about. People would see you swiping fruit. It's an original concept. Difficult to make this happen as often in this era. The indie sweet spot for services, if you want to build an ongoing business for years that can grow over time, is high quality gameplay, deep genre focus, and a strong publishing partner. As a publisher, you're looking for studios that are really eating, sleeping, breathing a particular category. You've been making games in racing or real-time strategy or social casino for years, and you understand what players want, and you're super passionate about that. That's the kind of developer that the top publishers are looking for, because they can scale that experience to a lot of people if you can bring a little bit of the magic that consumers are going to resonate with consumers. So great example of this would be Boss Alien, making CSR racing with natural motion. Did over $12 million in revenue in the first month, over $60 million to date, according to App Annie. Iron Force from Cool Fish, a tank battle game with Chilingo that's doing over $1 million a month in revenue. Slots Vacation with Fox Cub Games, collaboration with us at Scopely, now to over $10 million run rate in less than 250 days, and grown 250% since the beginning of this year. It's a great example of growing a game over time and building a long-term stable business. So deciding which route to take, I've got some examples of things that have happened in each of these categories. On the paid side, Plague from our friends at Endemic Creations, done over 18 million in revenue as a paid game with essentially a two-person team. It's a pretty good little business. There aren't many of these is a problem. The advantages of this are that you're not competing with large publishers because they're not interested in paid games anymore because they have low revenue ceilings. So there's not as many interesting new products there. You don't need to operate them as a service because you get paid when people download the product and it's over. And you're not at a disadvantage marketing it because it's very hard to market paid games with all of the performance marketing infrastructure I talked about. But this small revenue could still support a small developer. The other downsides are it's critically important to get featured because how else do you get that initial awareness? It's pretty much limited to iOS because it's very difficult to make any money off paid downloads on Android, which is the faster growing segment of the market, and limited geographical expansion because there aren't that many markets where the paid market is that big. You also expose yourself to free clones of your game, derivative titles that siphon off a lot of downloads. The free product route, we're talking about Make It Rain from Space Inch. You guys may have seen this game. It was a bit of a phenomenon over the last few months. It organically went to #1 in the US and was doing hundreds of thousands of downloads a day. This is what I would call a free product on your own. It's something that does not evolve. It's not a service, but it could generate millions of dollars in revenue. Attracted several other very similar looking games, as you can see there, very quickly that siphoned off a lot of downloads. Without a publishing partner, it's difficult to enforce the App Store to actually regulate and remove these things or change their icons or their names so that they're not siphoning off downloads. But again, in both cases, Plague is a game about killing everyone in the world. You're basically cultivating a disease and trying to kill everyone on the planet as fast as possible. So it is something that teenage boys would talk about with each other. It has strong word of mouth components. It's something that EA probably wouldn't do internally. Make It Rain, sort of associated with a certain kind of lifestyle. You're flipping money as fast as possible. It's kind of an edgy theme that people talk about, and when people see people frantically swiping their screen, people say, what are you doing? These are original concepts that people talk about, which is the important thing in removing that CPI disadvantage that you're at. If you're doing something that doesn't have strong word of mouth, it requires a paid marketing. The free product with a partner route, Mini Golf Matchup, was developed by just a two-man studio, Rocket Jump, in New Zealand, in conjunction with Scopely. This was the #1 game on the iPhone in 50 countries when we launched it together. Over 10 million downloads in the first month. It's now been downloaded by 1 in 10 Americans with an iPhone on iOS. It is not a service, has not evolved over time in the way that some of these other games have, but by working with a publisher, they were able to get global distribution on a huge scale. The free service route, we look at High School Story from Pixelberry. This is a pretty successful independent developer whose revenue graph here on iOS is, as you can see, peaked around $17,000 a day. It's something that was an underserved category at teenage girls that was overlooked by a lot of the large game developers, and so they were able to create a service and carve out a niche on their own, but difficult to maintain without being able to really scale the business globally and acquire more users. And then the free service with a partner route, Slots Vacation. Coming back to this, you're seeing just iOS revenue there growing over time, month over month, and the ability to support this live game as a service. Scopely's technology platforms help them increase the average revenue per paying user by 57% during this period, and it's one of the most retentive games. This made a lot of sense for them to work with a partner because they're coming into a crowded category in slots. Not many people show up at a party and they're like, I got to tell you about this great slot game on my phone that I'm playing. So you have to really scale through marketing. And so if you're competing in a crowded category, it makes a lot of sense to remove that disadvantage you're at against the incumbents by working with somebody who can help you scale. So these three routes that we're looking at, sort of lifestyle, business, hobbyist. If you're a small team, you want creative freedom. You don't want to be grinding it out, supporting the game with updates every day. Maybe you go the paid download route. Maybe you go with the free product route. If you want to build a dominant global publisher, if you can raise $5-10 million without significant dilution, you want to hire 100 people and put them on 4 continents and compete in the publishing world, then you should probably build a free service without a publishing partner and try and develop those competencies in-house. And if you're a passionate game maker who wants to focus on building great games and have stable long-term business, I think you're going to want to find a partner that you like, that you can work with for years to come, who can mitigate some of your risk and help you scale and compete. Because the way that we see this as a publisher is that basically all of the publishing functions get better the more scale you have. Distribution, analytics, ads, business development, all of those things, it's really helpful to have more scale. The only area it's not helpful is in new product ideation, and that ideation innovation comes from a distributed network of game developers. This is what everybody's trying to solve in this space. How do we find new ideas and the next products that are going to resonate with audiences? Supercell famously has really small teams that they leave very autonomous internally, and so they try and create this sort of distributed group of studios in-house. King sort of famously prototypes things on the web, takes the best performing games on the web and moves them to Facebook and then moves them to mobile, and so they're able to ideate quickly and find consumer engagement. Our strategy at Scopely is to work with a distributed network of studios, people all over the world who are doing amazing things, and they're really thinking about what is the consumer dying for that they don't have right now. And if we find that, we can help take it to scale and grow it over time and build a stable business where they can hire and expand and systematically grow their business with some confidence that it's still going to be there next year. So that's how we think about things. Hopefully this has been helpful for you. I'll open